forget to like and comment below. And what you think about, you bring about.
You hurry up. We have 80 miles to go.
We are talking about the movie 8 Found Dead. Now, it's described as a horror. I personally would probably put this more as like a thriller. But if you count a movie like Misery, based off a Stephen King book, as a horror, this is kind of like that type of horror film, if that makes sense. So, horror thriller, I guess you would say. Now, this film's kind of main trick, if you like, is it's telling 4 experiences from different groups of people, all about one particular property and one particular kind of interaction with a couple, but from 4 groups of people at different times. So it's kind of a non-linear story where we have flashes from the different kind of timelines intersecting to create the kind of the narrative as a whole. Then in your head you kind of can piece together sort of what came where, if that makes sense. It's not too hard to work out, but you know, just to give you a kind of an overview. So essentially we have this kind of remote kind of Airbnb. Now, we've seen a few horrors of the likes of kind of Barbarian, for example, use Airbnb as a kind of the basis of a kind of a horror movie. And this is another one. It's kind of a new genre, the bed and breakfast genre of horror movies. And essentially we have a single person, one couple, a second couple, and then a couple of police officers at different times, all turning up to this one property and then having to deal with a antagonistic force at this particular kind of property. Essentially we see these this older couple at this sort of property, and it's meant to be like a vacation home, and they shouldn't be there. These other people have kind of booked it, for example, but they're there. And then we have these kind of a series of dangerous kind of situations come up. So that's as vague as I'm going to be going with my plot synopsis there. Let's talk about what I think works. Now, I will say this movie is full of charisma in regards to its characters. Now, one of the big things I think, and if you use a movie like Misery, not that I'm really comparing this to Misery exactly, but is that one of the strengths of that movie is the character work done by the 2 characters, you know. Annie Wilkes and obviously the James Caan character. And it's a similar sense here in a way, because we do have a sort of collection of characters. Some are kind of more, in depth than others, but we do get a good feeling of charisma coming from most of the characters within this movie. Our older couple, for example, are the ones that really kind of tie all these ones together, and they are this couple who claim to be kind of like theatre actors, but they have some potentially ill intent towards our kind of roster of people that turn up at this house. But I've got to say, I think the actors here do a good job of making some charismatic characters who are seemingly quite unhinged, but you feel like they are pretty good roles, and they were probably like quite fun to play. And they have facets to their kind of the personalities, and they kind of, like, for example, they'll seem like they're being kind at one point. There'll be conversations where one character will seem like they're kind of comforting someone, but you know that there's malice in there. So they have these kind of like these nuanced kind of performances, multifaceted kind of like conversations where the people are saying one thing and then they're kind of meaning something else, and it's delivered well by the actors. But it isn't just this kind of older couple. I do feel the other actors as well also kind of do a good job, and we get kind of like in a reasonable sense, I have to say, of these couples and different dynamics. For example, we have two different couples. And they seem like somewhat kind of like more realistic couples, I have to say. And they're the bulk. The two couples tend to be the kind of the bulk of the running time. The cops and the kind of the single person are in it, but they get a little bit less sort of screen time, so we don't quite know them as much. But the two couples are really the focus here. And I gotta say, I thought everyone did a pretty good job in regard to the acting, the writing, and the sort of character development. Now, the style of the movie, as I say, is more of a thriller, to be honest with you, and it is. I have to say, you do have this kind of sense of tension and danger that kind of builds through the movie. I have a problem with kind of a certain aspect of it, which I'll come on to in a minute. But the concept here of having this kind of non-linear timeline, you know, it makes it so you have to pay attention a little bit more, I would say, and it kind of gives it this kind of, you know, a little bit of a point of difference. For example, had this movie been told in a more linear fashion, then it might have seemed more generic, if that makes sense. So that's maybe a little bit of a backhanded compliment, because, you know, it makes it have a little bit more of a kind of unique feel because of that. And, you know, it's all kind of filmed and produced in a kind of a, you know, I think a decent manner where it looks like, you know, it's had professionalism and polish behind the camera as well. So let's kind of maybe transition now to what doesn't work. As I've mentioned, had this been told in a linear fashion, it may be argued that this could be somewhat of a generic story, if we're being completely honest. When it's all said and done, I think the non-linear fashion sort of masks the fact that the actual kind of story here really isn't anything necessarily special and presents certain logical problems, to be honest. Let me just say the title is a little bit of a kind of clue. But like, if we're talking about people getting killed, my God, these people know how to clean, let me just tell you. And again, this is one of the logic issues we're talking about here. In the manner that people get killed, there'd be, I would have imagined, evidence left behind, which is never really addressed. It never really is in horror films. One of the big things, and this may be a personal thing, to be honest with you, so I'm not going to hold too much of a grudge against this movie for this, but it's a little bit like when films show the end of the movie at the beginning and you kind of flash back and kind of watch the circumstances up until that point. It's a trope that I personally don't like, because you kind of see the fates of what happens to certain characters, and it's true of this film. So you will see the kind of like the fates, shall we say, of certain characters before we see it actually happen on screen. And the issue that I have with that, it massively deflates tension, because you know what's going to happen with certain people. And regardless of whatever happens, you know, until we actually see it, we know ultimately this is going to happen to that person. So it's inevitable. So I think the conceit here may have made the movie feel a little bit more kind of complex than it really is, and kind of a little bit more sort of more of a thriller and a bit more twisty than it truly is, if you kind of think about the things in more of a linear order. But at the same time, I do feel it ends up becoming a problem, because you just know what'll happen, and you're thinking, well, you know, we know this is going to happen, so what leads up to that point now is irrelevant. I have to say, this couple of older people, I think they're great. I think they're charismatic, but I think if you sit back and look at this and think, if someone were acting like this, and I was I'd rented a holiday home, and I turned up there, and these older people were in there, and they were acting like this, you would just go. You know, and a couple of other people sort of threatened to at some point, but ultimately they don't. And it's like, well, I think it's a little unrealistic that the premise here is that more or less people just kind of settle in and go, oh well, we'll just kind of sit and drink with these people who are clearly not on the level. But okay, so there you go. That's my thoughts on the movie. But I do think it's certainly filmed in a way that gives the illusion that it's a little bit more of a twisting and turning and complex movie than it truly is. And I don't think, you know, outside of, I think, of revealing what happens, you know, I don't think it's hard to follow. I will give it a 6 out of 10 because I do think it's actually a fairly interesting movie in some ways, and you know, it's from what it does the best with the story that it probably could. I would suggest. There's the tease of a sequel. I actually think it would be better if they didn't do that. I think it's better off as a one-off, but whatever. So it's a 6 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to you next time. Bye for now.